Hello and welcome to the Dreaming and Doing podcast with me, Nicky Raby. I'm an actor, coach, writer, speaker, podcaster and a mum. And in my coaching work, I work with creatives, personal brands, freelancers and small businesses. In my podcast, I talk about success, but not in a traditional sense. I have conversations with those who have built a business from something they love or who have made a pivot in their career. Also those who have built a brand or a job that maybe didn't exist when they were at school and they found a way to monetize their skills, talents and expertise. I've spoken to loads of incredible people, coaches, designers, journalists, app creators, magazine editors, bloggers, content creators, authors, and all-round movers and shakers. I ask the questions that you want to know the answer to. So, how they started, about money, saying no, saying yes, pitching, presenting, putting yourself out there even though it terrifies you, standing out in a busy online world, growing, scaling and making your work for you and your circumstances. The show notes are always at nickyraby.com/podcast and the conversation continues across social media, often on Instagram, my favourite platform, at Nicky Raby. Thanks so much for listening. It's great to have you with us. In today's episode, I'm talking to Mark Leruste, who is the founder and the Chief Empowerment Officer of the Unconventionalists, and he's on a quest to help mission-driven organisations and leaders clarify their purpose to better inspire and lead their people. He was also the country manager at the Movember Foundation, where he helped to raise €2.8 million for men's health and inspired 110,000 fundraisers to sign up, winning multiple awards along the way. This is a really juicy one about entrepreneurship actually, and looking at what sort of the true meaning is behind it. We kind of see this very glossy version online where everybody's living their dream life, but I wanted to unpick that a little bit. We go into quite a lot of human psychology in this episode and how we make it work as parents as well. He's got so much information and to share, and it's a really long one, so buckle up kids and let me know where you're listening. Tag me at Nicky Raby over on Instagram, or you can come and join in the conversation over on the show notes at nickyraby.com/podcast. Enjoy, and I'll see you next time. Morning, Mark. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Nicky. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's great. Let's start with you. How would you describe your job and what you're all about and where you're up to? This is obviously the first 20 minutes of the podcast.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's such an interesting question, right? And it's one that I kind of joke around with groups I work with and stuff around. What is the first question we ask? It's kind of like, what do you do? There's something safe actually in asking people what we do, because we can then suddenly maybe understand better what they're about, or we can also try and relate to what they do. And then sometimes when they say what they do and we have no idea what that is, we can even be a little bit freaked out and more curious. So thank you for the question. I appreciate it. So what I do, I run a company called the Unconventionalists, and I've been doing that for about 2 years. And really it started off as this kind of, I guess, crazy idea or maybe mission, or whatever you want to call it, that there was surely another way that we could show up in the way that we work. What I mean by that is, I spent 10 years in the corporate sector, the non-profit, the charity sector, and I had some amazing, colleagues, amazing kind of opportunities to do some great work, and maybe I'll talk a bit more about, for example, my role at November when I was country manager. But one thing I always saw is that wherever you saw people, there's pain, but there's also hope in that way. And so what I was seeing is that, I worked from one of the top business management schools, graduate schools, and yet I was still seeing some really poor managerial decisions and poor leadership. And this happened across every organization I've ever worked for. And so one of the things I started off, the classic kind of route, I guess, about 6 years ago, I discovered coaching. and it really changed my life. And then I wanted to help more people experience that. So I trained as a coach with, CTI, the Coaches Training Institute. So that took me about 2 years all in all, to go through the certification and all the exams, written exams, all that stuff, all the hours of practice. And I had a full-time job back then. I was, country manager of the November Foundation, and I was coaching on the side people in Vietnam and America and Denmark and Australia. And so it was this really cool kind of hard work, I guess it would be, but it was also exhausting because I was doing that at night and I was doing that in the morning.
And you're figuring out how you feel about all of this as well. I remember when I did my coach training, I was like, oh my goodness, I didn't realise I was so angry at that 5-year-old who once said this to me. And it brings up all of your own things as well. Yeah.
But it's. I think there's something healing in giving an opportunity for someone to be seen, heard and loved, I guess. And that's kind of one of my, beliefs, that we all actually have a need to be seen, heard, and loved. It sounds a bit woohoo, but really that's what it boils down to. And so I was doing that on the side, and at the same time, I realized that there was a need for more honest conversations to take place, and especially in the public domain. And that basically manifested itself as me starting a podcast. So I created a podcast called The Unconventionalists. That's how the company started. It started actually as a podcast first. That was like 3 years ago. And I emotionally blackmailed pretty much everyone I knew to come on the show, who had a remotely interesting story to tell. And so I was in this really weird world. I had this full-time job and I had this side project, I guess kind of passion project, that was split into one side. I was interviewing all these really amazing, incredible people who challenged status quo, unconventional leaders, doing, unconventional things. And on the other side, I was life coaching these individuals who wanted more in their life, who wanted, more fulfillment, wanted to have more meaning and have a purpose, all this kind of stuff. And what happened is that as I was in this kind of intersection between people who wanted to leave their jobs because of whatever reason, and they made up that they wanted to become these people who I was also interviewing. But when I was interviewing these people, I was also finding out that they were struggling, that there was a lot of pain, a lot of loneliness on this journey. But more than that, they were the same, ultimately. These two groups of people were ultimately the same. The only difference is that one had started taking action and somehow not let those doubts get in the way of putting themselves out there, and the other ones were still in that kind of vicious circle of self-doubt and all that stuff. And so that led me to give a TEDx talk on what I learned basically between those two worlds and also what it takes to find purpose and stuff. And then one thing that happened after about 6 years of working with people trying to help them basically escape jobs they don't love, to build a career of their dreams, that kind of stuff. I started realizing that maybe I was approaching the problem the wrong way. And what I mean by that is I was trying to fix, like, once it had happened, one of us was broken, I was trying to fix it and heal. If that, even though those aren't the words I like to use because no one needs to be fixed. And so instead I started looking at what if I could actually go into companies and go into organizations and actually take everything I've learned from the last 6 years of really getting, an unparalleled access to people's reasons for leaving jobs, the reason why people are emotionally disengaged from their workplace. There's this famous Gallup study that was made in 2011, 2012, which is the world's largest study ever made to understand job satisfaction from employees around the world. And they basically found that 87% of employees worldwide feel emotionally disengaged from their workplace. Wow. And that really struck with me. It really kind of, I was like, whoa, that's crazy. And, in Britain alone, 1 in 3 people feel that their jobs are meaningless. And so there's this real kind of crisis, kind of purpose crisis happening. And I was also starting to get brought into companies to do much more work with millennials. So how to better understand millennials, how to lead millennials, leadership for millennials. So I was doing a lot of that work. And so all this kind of web started to boil down to this very simple realization. And that is that companies are made of people. And all these people are somehow feeling like they're not being heard, that they're not being respected, or whatever you want to fill in the blank, right? And yet people in HR, people in like leaders I was speaking to cared, but they couldn't figure out what was happening. Mm. And so I started going to companies and working with teams, working with leaders, and doing more kind of workshops and keynotes and coaching there. And basically what I realized is that in that process, I had this thing where I would, for every keynote I give, I would say, okay, on top of that, I'm also going to have one-to-one conversations with, 10 members of your team across the board, from junior newbies to CEOs, to really get an idea of what's going on in the organization. And what happened then was that although I learned a ton of really practical stuff about how the organization was operating, what was in the system, what was not working, what was working, the people who I was speaking with would then go, that was like one of the best hours I've spent in a long time in this company. And I thought, that's crazy. That is so crazy that just having someone who's totally unattached, someone who's completely with no agenda, someone who holds a confidential space. What we do for our coaching clients all the time. But in the corporate setting, having had that and just basically being able to open up about all the shit that they were going through, all the stuff that they didn't feel worked, without the fear of repercussions of being judged, or repercussions of being fired, or repercussions of having negative relationships, I was like, there's something here. Yes. There's something happening here. And so that's when I basically started launching the Unconventionalists program basically into companies. I guess what I do today is I work with organizations around employee engagement. And instead of doing the typical kind of, and there's nothing wrong with that, I think it's really needed, right? But like yoga, bean bags, and ping pong tables. I actually provide... AstroTurf. Yeah, AstroTurf. Yeah, that's exactly right. So I kind of provide coaches for organizations to go in and spend some time with their teams on a one-to-one basis across the board. So it's basically democratizing coaching, making it accessible to all, and really helping organizations invest in their people on the long-term basis versus the short-term basis. And what was cool and trendy 10 years ago just won't cut it today. So that's what I do. I kind of, it's very exciting. It's very cool to see some really cool companies who get on board on this, who get it, and some people just don't, and that's okay. So I get to work with some really cool coaches who I kind of place in organizations, and I get to hang out with a lot of leaders and better understand what the pain points are. And it's on the beginning, and I'm really hoping that this is going to, take root, take seed. And I say this, and I really mean this. I think that within 10 years' time, it will be a total given that when you join a company, you get access, if you want to a personal coach. Yes. It will be the same way that you get universal medical care. It will be the same way that you are expected to be treated with respect to the company. It will be, what is your personal coaching program like within this company? There'll be those kind of questions. It'll take 10 years, I reckon, especially with the rise of the digital age. It's never been a better time to ask ourselves, what does it mean to be really human? And I think with machine learning, AI, automation already taking place right now in organizations, people already being afraid of being replaced, I think it's a beautiful moment to be more human and to help leaders lead from a human-centric place.
I completely and utterly agree, because I also feel that sometimes the well-being or the transformation, we sometimes feel like it has to take 5 years, but actually somebody just asking you a really killer question that just makes you stop and think, and you go, oh my goodness, that's a complete and utter game changer. I've never heard it being said in that way. One thing that I share sometimes with my clients when they're really sort of stuck on that vision of, sometimes they've just got to the point where they're like, I don't want this, but I actually don't know what I want. So all that brainstorming around, wouldn't it be cool if, that there's a big piece of that puzzle, which is about permission. And I think that would be brilliant to speak on, of how you made that transition to realizing that your skills could be packaged in a different way. And has that always been part of your life? I mean,
No, it's a good question. It's it's interesting because, well, I guess there's two sides to that question for me. One of them that comes up is, I've always had things on the side from like, as far as I can remember, I've always had side projects. When I was, taking it way back to when I was like a teenager, I was a skateboarder, and I thought all the skateboard gear was really expensive, and so I wanted to create my own company. It was called Harsh. I never did anything with it. I just ironed some stuff in T-shirts and pretend like I was selling, my logo T-shirts. But what I would do is I would grab shoes, and I would I would buy, a really old pair of shoes that no one wanted, or I was giving it to it, I'd repair it, fix it up, then sell it up or exchange it. I did that for a while, and then throughout all university, I always had I had a radio show, I had a society that was nominated for Best New Society of the Year. I always had side stuff. And every time I had a job, I always had a side project. I had a startup called Mr. Taylor. It was an online tailoring suit company for men back in 2009, before tailored shirts was really a big thing. Even when I was at Movember, I had all these side projects. I wrote a book, I ran a retreat, I launched a plant-based protein company in 7 days with 100 pounds. Like I always had a bunch of stuff on the side. But what I think is most interesting about the question you just asked, and I'm not sure if that's what you meant, and yet I'll run with it, is that I made up. So when I left my last job, so the last full-time job I had was I was country manager of the Movember Foundation, a beautiful organization trying to change the face of men's health and trying to get men to open up.
Charity.
It really
There's
is.
a lot of facial hair that always goes on in our house every November.
That's amazing, and please, I want to thank you and thank your partner as well. And it is.
Oh, I was talking
about
about me. Really teasing. I sport a beard in November. Just whack it out.
Yeah, and your 3-year-old. But it's and it's kind of that was my last job. And one of the things that happened is when you have this kind of real visceral experience and a negative experience, I guess, in a certain environment, you start making it up that it's like that all the time and everywhere. What I mean by that is when I was going through my corporate experience, I had a really and I don't know what the swearing policy on is, but I'll say crap experience. And so I kind of made up that there is no way I could go and work with companies and corporates. And so I started the last 6 years I was doing this on the side. I was very much in the entrepreneurial space. I was very much in the aspirational space of career change, of starting your own business, coaches, solopreneurs, founders. And I still love that, right? I still love that world. It's still a world I belong to. It's still a world that I find fascinating, and I still draw a lot of my learnings for companies. But the point is, I made up somehow that I was too wacky, too entrepreneurial, too coachy for companies. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
But why, if you look underneath that, what do you think that really was?
Yeah. So exactly. So basically, what happened is that. I forgot how it started, but I think someone contacted me from a company. So actually, I know 2 things happened. Someone from a company contacted me and said, hey, we're looking for a speaker to come in about finding meaning and purpose in the work you do. Also, they didn't frame, I framed it like that, but it was a different thing. They said, be connecting up people, whatever. And I went there, and it was a financial company, it was Intuit. I'll name them because they're one of the first companies who brought me in. And so I was a little bit like, oh my God, how does this work? I wrote a book about how to quit your job and do meaningful work, how the hell am I going to do it?
You have to go back in as your identical twin who happens just to look the same.
Yeah, exactly, like Andy Bateman. And so I did that, and what was fascinating was the Q&A session, was hearing all what was the stuff that was coming up and being able to process it and talk about it and really normalize it. And people came up to me at the end and were really enthusiastic, leaders and employees. So that was the first time I was like, okay. The second time was I was invited by Boring Money to go over and do a conference on It's the Consumer Stupid. It's a massive financial conference that happened at bank. The Minister of Pensions was there, CEOs of big banks were there, and they invited me. And I thought, why the hell are you inviting me? I had to retake my accounting exams 3 times at uni. I suck at maths.
You're not going to ask for my certificates because I can't present them today. Please don't ask me to multiply something. And so she was like, no, actually, we're looking for a disruptive kind of unconventional speaker, that kind of stuff. And so I got on stage, gave my talk. I rock up in my trainers, my jeans, and I think I did put a shirt on, like a checkered shirt for the occasion. And at the end, I had people from Virgin Money and Emerald Insurance come up to me and they're like, wow, that was really refreshing. And so suddenly I think that's when the seed was planted. I kind of thought, oh, maybe this is actually needed in companies. And maybe there's a way of having, a bigger impact than going from the one-to-one that I've been doing so far to the one-to-many and actually going to companies. And so that's how it started. And then I think my TEDx talk really helped as well, if I'm honest.
it's going to hit probably 300,000 views by the end of the year.
And it's so great. It really is.
Thank you very much. It means a lot, because it means every time I get a message from someone on Instagram or a Facebook tag or something like that, it always surprises me that it reaches that far. But so that talk has helped me put myself a bit more out there, because companies will see it and say, actually, can you come in? And so that's how it started. And I think if I could, it's a long rounded answer back to your question. What did I make up? I made up that I was too much or not enough. It was one of those two. I made up that companies wanted a suited, professional 7 steps to strategies to leadership, effective, and actually what they really want is just someone who can be with them. Yes. And to allow them to actually be seen. And I've done some work with some super corporate institutions, right? Like what I just from the top of my head, State Street is a huge financial organization with, I think they own 10% of the world's assets. They've been around for 100 years, and yet I found myself in a room with a bunch of people who are more used to the corporate aspect of work and suits and stuff. And after my sessions with them, or after providing the coaching, what you see is you really feel there's a shift. Yes. And it's like, I'm on your team, like, and I'm not on anyone's team. And it sounds weird to say that, but what I mean by that is, this is to anyone who ever wants to anyone who wants to bring in people in their company to do some work. I think you have an agenda as leadership, right? Which is, we want people to be productive. We want to improve our bottom line. We want to people feel more engaged. Whatever that prerogative is, that's great. However, the counterintuitive way of achieving that is to do the very opposite thing that you think is needed, which is to say that I'm willing for you to come in and tell us what we need to hear, not what we want to hear. Tell us what we need to hear. And I think it takes a lot of courage. I learned that, I gave a talk recently at Event Lab at Higher Space, the annual event, and I shared this story that really, for me, it kind of, I guess, paints a point. And that is, I was about to run a workshop for a company, for a team. And right before the workshop, the team leader took me aside and asked me, actually, what are you going to do? Like, what are you planning on doing in the session? And I could see, obviously, that there was a bit of resistance. And, I say what I often say to people before I go and give my first talk. I'm here to share a different way of being and thinking, and to kind of bring the team back together, feel connected to the vision and mission of the organization, so they really feel like they want to commit and perform to their best abilities and be their best selves, all this stuff, And she replies, "Oh, great. I was afraid you were going to get them to talk about the problems, and we just don't have time for that."
Wow.
Yeah. And so in that moment, a couple of things came up. One of them is, I realized actually how vulnerable it is and scary it is to be a leader, because you're so afraid that people might realize and see that you haven't got all your shit together, that you haven't got all the answers, that you may also self-doubt yourself, that you may also not be aware of everything that needs to be said and done. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I realized how quick I was to judge her, and how quick it was easy for me to go, wow, that's so messed up. How could you do that? And instead, that was actually one of the kind of pivotal moments in my business where I pivoted and said, I need to support more organizations and leaders to actually be okay with getting their people to open up and talk about what's needed, because that's the key and secret to creating a high-performing team, to create a high-caring culture. That's what's needed.
I feel like it always comes back to, I've said it lots on the podcast before, that sense of somebody needs to hear it from you, because putting yourself out there and actually going for something is of course really scary, especially if you haven't done it before, especially if you have those limiting beliefs of, well, I'm not the kind of person to do that, I'm too tall, too short, too whatever. And once you start to look for those excuses, they all come out to play as well. But I've said it before, but this sense of, I was terrible at science in the first 2 years of secondary school, and then suddenly I had this quite terrifying, she looked a little bit Quentin Blake, like a Quentin Blake drawing of Roald Dahl. I definitely wouldn't have messed with her. She was terrifying. But she said what I needed to hear in such a great way and then I found out that I was going to get her for the next 2 years as well. And I was like, this is going to be amazing. And she really helped me through. And I think what we're all craving now is these different types of voices. And so wherever you're at, like we were just saying before we came on the call, that I would get more likes if I took more pictures of me on the beach, but that's not from the book, the Big Leap, that's not my zone of genius. But really tapping into what is that thing that you can do that really helps you to be your best self is great. And the fact that you're facilitating this in businesses, I mean, so often, if I've ever done sort of corporate work, everything is just stepping into the shoes of the person that was before you. And there are all these things of, well, that's just the way that we've always done it. Or if you could dress up and be like Bernard, who left 5 years ago, but if you can just do that, that would be great. And you think, but actually, was Bernard's system great? Did that work? Why did Bernard leave? What's gone on?
Yeah, and there's that old saying: people don't leave companies, people leave people, right? People leave managers, and so, what I love about what you said was actually when you start exploring this journey of what is the work that makes you come most alive, that you get to do, your zone of genius, your flow. What you start realizing is that you start giving yourself permission to actually embrace that part of you, and the more you show that to the world, the more you show that with your work, with your clients, the more it's felt, the more genuine it is. And it's like this, I don't know what would be what's the opposite of vicious circle? The grateful circle? I don't know what would be anyway, it's the opposite circle. It becomes this snowball effect of really cool stuff because you start...
Yeah, momentum.
I think so. And I think, again, it took me, obviously, I think it's very romantic to hear me talk about this story. I mean, we're talking about it over a period of 6 years, right, to try and figure this out. And maybe even of a lifetime. So I make it sound like it was a quick kind of clear thing, and it wasn't. And still to this day, I'm still, now I'm starting to build a company. I've got like a new teammate in, and so there's you start finding every single time a new edge, a new stretch growth area, and a new, impossible task. And then, for example, I had a call yesterday with a client, and I thought it was going to be a great call, and then it didn't work out, and then you start self-doubting yourself, and you start thinking, shit, is there something wrong with the product? And then I had a chat with a friend yesterday, and she said something great. She said, think about all the people who have ever done anything meaningful. They all had to go through this period of having to prove the world that they saw something that the world wasn't yet ready to see, but was needed, or had created something that was not yet ready and yet will be. So there's this kind of this belief that you have to hold on to, that you're on the right track. If you believe in this, then this is needed, and eventually, and hopefully, I want to say, it will pay off.
Absolutely. And that sense of you just continuously doing it and saying it out loud, and that sort of taking daily actions to what it is where you're going, that in itself sort of rewires your brain. I mean, clearly, the year 9 science is now coming out to play, but it rewires your brain that actually things are easier. I mean, I remember when I qualified as a life coach 5 years ago, I could barely say that I was a life coach because I just felt so perplexed by the term I hadn't stepped into. I mean, I may as well have said, hi, I'm a serial killer. I think I probably would have found that easier, and clearly not.
It's very true.
But it just felt such a term that I wasn't connected with yet. And I think they always go hand in hand, that sense of, and I think it's great that you shared that it's been over a period of 6 years, that not only has there been that strategy of continuously emailing or networking events or working late or trying something new, reinvention, but also there's this mindset cog of, come on, kid, keep going. It's fine. Today is not the day. That's fine. We wake up tomorrow, or we'll be well. And the two always just go hand in hand. And sometimes they're in conflict, and sometimes those beautiful days where everything goes to plan, they're joining hands and skipping around the room.
Yeah, and it happened on the same day. So that morning, I won a new client. It was amazing. It was on a high, and in the afternoon, I didn't get a client. So it can happen on the same day. And then it's interesting. I really, my latest episode on my podcast, The Unconventionalists, was with the founder of Growth Tribe, David Arnu, who's happens to be a childhood friend of mine. And I went over to his office in Amsterdam, and it's incredible what they've built. They've got like a 2-floor building, 80 people working for him. a massive buzz, like all these young people, students, all this stuff there. It's incredible. And so I was interviewing him, and at one point, what I realized is that he's been trying to build businesses for the last 12 years.
Yes.
So this is his fourth business, and it's his most successful business. But it's taken him 12 years to get there. So like when you look on paper and you see how many, like, you know, the millions that they've made in revenue the last 2 years alone, they've just started for 2 years, and they're super successful. They're operating in 6 countries. You know, when you look at that, you can go, oh my God. But then you go, well, actually, each co-founder, the 3 of them, have a background and years and decades of experience in something or the other, and collectively have brought that back and have managed to make this great algorithm of magic around their business. And so I think it's easy on the outside to look at someone else we follow. You know, for example, I don't know if your community look at Mary for Leo, for example, but she's an interesting example in our kind of community and space. You know, a lot of people look at what she does today, and she does a B School, 1 launch a year. She's got these amazing high production quality videos on YouTube. You know, and I've got a YouTube channel, and I always go, oh my God, I finally had this production.
Yes.
But actually,
and where's the next font coming from? It all just looks so gorgeous.
I know, it's exactly right. And so, but you go back to when she started, and she's been doing this for like 14 years or something like that, right? 12 or 14 years. And you go back to the first day, she's using a webcam on her laptop.
Yes. And the thing I love about it is that those videos are still there, and they are still available, so people can kind of see where that has come from. I feel like that with my acting stuff that I do, that last year I had my best success rate acting career to date, and I didn't think that, I mean, I thought clearly I would be in the Hollywood Hills by this point, but you know, that's coming. It's all coming. But it's that moment of like, oh, actually we can do that at 36, that it doesn't have to be limited to the fact that you haven't achieved everything you wanted to when you were 19. I mean, I just wasn't in the headspace to be able to do that. But I think also as well, when you look back, you think, oh, I've actually been doing this for 25 years. It's never, and those kind of conversations, well, it's all right for you, or some people just get lucky, and it's like lucky and tired because they've really been working hard. Yeah,
but it's true. And it's, you know, I'm sure through your podcast, you know, through all your interviews, you start absorbing a bit of wisdom and knowledge from every single guest. There's a little part of every guest that you kind of take away with you, little bits of them. And for me, the one thing I've learned, you know, and I've interviewed people from, you know, politicians to world record breakers to, you know, social media giants to, you know, the founder of the Unconventionalists and so forth. So really interesting people, you know, or Sarah Knight, the author of like those incredible books.
Yes.
And so what you realize is that I want to say it's a combination of that. There's no coincidence, and there is. It's like they keep going. That's all it is. It's like they eventually, at some point, they had this crazy idea, and they decided to go with it, and they just kept on going and kept on going, and it happened. And it's like it's a bit hard for me sometimes to try and people ask me sometimes if it's still what I've learned, or share like a one nugget, and I would say like the biggest mistake that people make is to make up that everybody else has got their shit together. They don't.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like,
and I think always questioning why you're letting yourself believe that, because I think sometimes when you do that, you're letting yourself off the hook of, oh well, it's never gonna happen because, you know, I can't do X, Y, and Z. But actually, that is something that is not given at birth. That it has been something that's been worked on.
Yeah, no, exactly. I haven't yet found that there's a specific correlation between people who achieve amazing things and people who don't. I don't think it's like, oh, they're born special, they've got this extra thing. I don't know if I believe that. What I would say is that they have somehow managed to not let that voice of doubt, that judge, that saboteur, that gremlin, that whatever you want to call it, be the louder voice overall.
Yes.
All right, over time. And what I mean by that is that everyone has it. You know, everyone has doubt. Everyone feels insecure. Everybody feels like they're winging it. I mean, how many times have I interviewed people who I look up to and they go, mate, I have no idea what I'm doing. I feel like any moment now I'm going to be called out on my shit.
Excuse me, could Mark just leave the room, please?
Yeah, excuse me, no, busted. It's with the fraud police, and you're full of shit. So we know you wing. You got here just. But it's interesting. My partner did a master's in neuroscience at Oxford, and there's this thing that happens when you go to Oxford is that everybody thinks that everybody else is smarter than them, but everyone does that. So it's like I forgot what it's called. There's something quite. It's like the fraud factor or something like that. No, the imposter syndrome. That's it. The imposter syndrome. And everyone has that. The only difference is, would you dance with it and let it be part of the journey, or will you shame it and make it wrong and let it ground you?
Yeah.
As in ground you, not like in a positive way, but as in store you. And that's what it is. It's, yeah, I don't know why I went on the tangent on that, but it was...
No, you're right. And I feel like I've kind of made, I've kind of given it I don't talk to it in that way, but I've sort of given it a bit of a comedy element where my imposter syndrome pops up to say hello. And I have that, oh, you're here again. All right. Okay, cool. See you then, because you're not really much help, and sort of keeping it light rather than this sort of, many times I get messages from clients in between our sessions, that sense of, I'm trying to launch this thing, I'm trying to do something, but I'm getting all these signs from the universe that I shouldn't do it. And quite often it gets to that point where they're like, oh, it's not a sign from the universe, it's just part of being business. It's just, logistical things. I wanted to talk quickly about how your work has, and your mission and your why, I guess, has changed since you became a parent.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's such a weird, it's interesting because it's such a weird and undescribable experience of becoming a parent. And I'm not putting a label of better or worse or good or bad. It's just really weird. You can't really explain it. I think if my brother told me this before I had a kid, he said there's worlds of people with kids and people without kids. And I thought, it's a bit judging, it's a bit extreme. And I was like, oh shit, I get it now. Yeah, you're right. It's when you have a kid, first of all, my biggest realization was like, wow, I was really self-centered.
But I think that's a good thing. I think you should do that, because when entrepreneurs talk about morning routines of 2 hours of meditation, usually I get from Oscar, I need a poo mummy, and that is not me living my best entrepreneurial life.
That's it, and it's a bit that's it's so fascinating. My partner and I, we joke about this, like we used to have these spacious mornings. We get up really early and have creative mornings and the artist way, like journal and meditate and then go for a walk. Wow, so conscious. Then you have a kid and your whole life changes.
Yeah.
And for me, there's a few things that change. There's this realization that it's no longer about me; it's about us. There's this realization that there's a realization that saying that you have a duty towards someone else is not the word I'm looking for, but there's something about you feel a responsibility for someone else. And then you start messing around, like as in you don't have time to do all these questions like, oh, should I do this? Should I not do that? It's like, you've got to get your shit together.
I've got an hour and I've got 30 emails. Let's go.
Oh my God. Oh no, that's a whole other, that's like laser focus. When you've only got an hour, you're going to make sure. And the other thing is, you become much better at saying no. I've become much better at saying no. Sorry, let me rephrase that to my experience. As in, I've got an example, actually, a specific example. So I did a leadership program about 3 years ago, and it was a 10-month beautiful program. There was 23 of us to do it, and we still to this day, once a year, organize a follow-up kind of retreat to all get together. We're all like 17 different nations around the world. We all come back together and spend 3 days where we get to kind of create workshops for each other and talks, and it's amazing. It's beautiful. It's great. And there's like 4 or 5 guys, and the rest are women, I think. I'm exaggerating. I think there's like 6 guys. But so we always share bedrooms together, and all the women are together. And so I got there a bit early, and there's a point to the story. I got there a bit early, and I'm there with one of my tribe mates, and I'm asking, like, what's the bed situation? He's like, oh, well, there's these 2 rooms left. You can share it with me if you want, or you can share with someone else. I was like, oh yeah, cool, yeah, we haven't shared a room in a while. Sounds good. And I start getting my suitcase in the bedroom. Now, keep in mind that when you're a parent, nights are a luxury. Sleep is a luxury. I mean, I really want to put this forward because people do not understand what being tired means until you have kids.
Right.
Like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear about you went out last night and you're hanging balls, whatever the expression you want to use. I don't hear about it. You don't know what tired is. Like, you don't know what torture is until you've had a kid. And so, long story short, he basically says, oh, by the way, I forgot my breathing operating thing, so I snore. And I was like, wait, you snore? He's like, yeah. I was like, mate, no chance I'm sharing a room with you. And so I take my bag.
You are interfering with my perfect sleep conditions.
Yeah. And so he goes, oh, what do you mean? And he starts taking first. I was like, mate, I love you, but I love my sleep more.
Right.
Now that is what being a parent does to you. I became much more comfortable in owning what I needed and what I wanted because I have so little room of it.
Yes.
Right? It's because you have so many, like the windows of claiming something for you are so small that when you get the opportunity, you grab it with both hands. So that's what being a parent has also helped me done. Like, as in, oh, do you want to come out to this stuff that you really don't care about? Actually, no, I don't. I'm not. Sorry. I've only got like one evening a week that I can take off. And I'm going to make sure it's something I really want to do. So that has changed. And the why, I think, maybe the cliche thing is like the concept of legacy comes a bit clearer. That it's not just about me, but it's about her generation. And a lot of it is actually, this is what moves me or drives me in a way. And it's this idea that, like, how do I want to act and be in the world, both as a man, as a partner, as an entrepreneur, as a company creator right now, like, with my teammates. How do I want to be in a way that my daughter will be proud?
Yes.
I think that also makes you behave differently. And I'll tell you the last thing I want to share, because I think this is really important. I have a daughter. And so I grew up with a brother. I have two uncles. My dad was like five. My dad's dad was like five brothers, something silly. So I always grew up in a very male, kind of dominant environment, even though my family systems have always been matriarchal. So the women are the head of the families in my family. But the point being is, I had a daughter, and that really changed me in a way of understanding how society is geared really in a kind of a patriarchal way. And what I mean by that is, I don't want to point fingers, but I'll read a book, like even like a coaching, self-help, whatever development book, and it will always be he. Very rarely will it be she. And so you start noticing those things, right? You start noticing how we actually, from a very young age, treat girls and boys differently. How something's cute, oh, but you're strong. So these little nuances that you think don't matter, but for me, I've started to realize that. And so I've become much more aware of things like when I go into a room, I very rarely now say, hey guys, I'll say, hey gang, or hey team, or how's everyone doing?
I think that conscious nature is just so key of making sure, you can't be questioning every single decision throughout the day, but just even when I like dress my son, I never buy those things that say, here comes trouble, or any of that, because ultimately I don't want him to be a knob. I want him to be a good person in the world. And fortunately I've got a partner. That's that my work is done, but even I'm solo parenting at the moment for 5 weeks. We're on week 3 and we're hanging in there. But during that time, I've taught my son how to work the washing machine. And some people must be like, what is she doing? Because, that's an electrical thing. But I'm right there with him. And also, I need him not to rock up when he moves out from home and just expect a girl to do it or a partner. And it's those sort of things of actually, I've realised if I spend that time cooking or doing stuff. He even said to my dad, Grandad, why can't you do the scrambled egg? And I thought, because Grandad has been waiting for other people to make the scrambled egg.
Right. And it's I was laughing because I just came back from Amsterdam, delivering some work in Amsterdam, and I bought my daughter a jumper that says "Future Astronaut."
Yes, good
which
one.
Was it was such a cool little jumper. Like Amsterdam is so cool in design, and they're really kind of forward thinking in that way, and it's such a cute little jumper. And it's a bit that. And the other thing I think that really helped, and if anybody who's listening to this are either becoming parents, thinking about becoming parents, or recently become parents, there's a great interview on the Lewis Howes podcast, The School of Greatness, with what's her name? It's not Dr. Shanti, but it sounds like that.
Oh, it's about the conscious parent, is
yes,
it? Yes,
yes,
she's wonderful.
Yes, and it was really amazing because she basically, the thing I really took away from it, and actually once I listened to it, I re-listened to it sitting down constantly with my partner, with like old school, just sitting there listening to the podcast, both of us. And the reason why I did that is because I think two things really landed for me. One of them is that they are sovereign beings. They are totally independent from us. We do not own them. They do not belong to us. They will not have the same dreams and aspirations as us. They may not even have the same set of values as us, and that's okay.
Yes.
So that was the first one. The first one was like, they are their own thing. Like, your role is not to shape them into who you want them to be. Even though I am with you 100%, I do not want my kid to be a knob. I love that expression. And you're going to have to, realize at one point that he may or may not, or she or may not, be who, I've got friends like that who experience like their kids are totally different than them.
Yes.
Like they were really alpha male, sporty, and their kids are total geeks.
Yes.
Like who hate sport. And it's like, whoa, how do I relate and connect to my child when it's a totally new world? I used to make fun of those kids when I was a kid, and now I've got one.
Yeah.
It was like that. And so there's that. The second thing I want to share, which I got away, was actually see your children as teachers. See them as much of an opportunity to grow and learn from than you can teach and learn, and they can learn from you. And those 2 points really landed with me because it really made me think, oh, cool. So if I actually see her as an opportunity for growth and learning, then how different would our dynamic be?
Oh, and that sense of just parenting the child that you have has been so key that, if I actually listen to what he needs and what his wants are, and he's always been that kid that doesn't really like surprises. He's a bit like, he can't read yet because he's very gifted, clearly, but yeah, he's only 3. We signed him up for all the best schools, but he is that child who's like, tell me everything, tell me what's going to happen next, what's going on, whether I'm going to wear my shoes or my wellies. Can you tell me that all in advance of the day? And so I know that in the morning that's part of our routine. Likewise, going to sleep at night, we always talk about our favorite things of the day, and often it's like, oh, I really enjoyed watching that thing on telly, and you're like, what about the museum that we went to though? That was great too.
But then it's hard though. Like I think that's the hardest thing as a parent, is not to dump your shit on your kids. That's the hardest thing, I think. And to both, I remember having this conversation with my parents' friends years and years and years ago, and asked him, what do you think is the secret to parenting? And these 3 things have stayed with me. We're talking like 2 decades ago. And he said, make them feel loved, give them a sense of self-confidence, or something, help them with their confidence, and give them a good sense of humor.
Yes.
And if they feel loved, they feel confident, and they can take, they know they'll be all right. I remember just going, oh yeah, that's really cool. So that stuck with me,
And it's really basic, but if you kind of can go back to that sort of foundation, it's great. Where can people find you, and not in a creepy way, but where can they come and visit online and connect with you and listen to the podcast?
So there's a few things you can do. So I respond the quickest to Instagram, so I'm at Mark Leruste, on also social media platforms like Twitter, Facebook. But Instagram, that's where I hang out the most. If you want to see me visually, then go and check out my YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/Mark Leruste. Always love and appreciate a subscribe button and a comment. And then my podcast, you can go to the Unconventionalists.com or .org if you want to go straight to iTunes. And I've got over 100 episodes with some really, really cool people. Go and check that out. And then if you want to jump on my weekly musing, where I kind of share my insights and tips in a weekly format on helping people find their purpose, then that's at markleruste.com.
Fantastic. Goodness me, I've loved this chat. Thank you so much for your time today, Mark. I know you're such a busy guy, and hopefully we'll get to meet in person. And just to clarify on this, then, of course my son is going to have knobbish moments over the years, because believe me, I have had plenty of my own. And if my parents are listening to this, they'll be like, should we talk to you about the ages of 16 to 18 when you were a complete hooligan? But of course, we're all a work in progress. But thank you so much for the chat today.
Welcome.
It's been brilliant.
Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I would love to hear what you thought of the episode and share any takeaways with me. Come and find me across social media at Nicky Raby, or you can visit the podcast page, nickyraby.com/podcast.